Hey, have you ever heard the expression or asked the question, do we only use 10% of our brains? Well, the answer to that is incredibly complex. But what I can tell you is that some people can live with half a brain. And that's today on Mysteries Mysteries. I am Mr. E, and we're going to explore all things mysterious in the world of psychology. Our story today is about something called neuroplasticity. Think of it this way. Our brain is this malleable Play-Doh type of thing that we can manipulate into this magnificent structure, right? Okay. Slightly more complex than that, but we'll put it this way. The more you learn, the younger you are, the more connections you're going to make in your brain. So the more your neurons are going to connect with one another. What I mean by that is this. The size of our brain doesn't matter. The size of our brain compared to our body doesn't matter. What actually matters is the neural connections that we make in our brain. Neural connections being one neuron connecting to another, connecting to another, connecting to another. That creates something called parallel processing, which is a whole bunch of circuits that are working simultaneously in what looks like a spider web. Totally interesting, right? What happens though when something goes wrong? With neuroplasticity, easy for me to say, with neuroplasticity, what we have is the ability when one part of our brain becomes damaged, another part of our brain can take over. Now, neuroplasticity does not work for everybody. It works for the young ones. As we get older, our brain becomes more rigid. Think of it this way. You have a grandpa or grandma that are set in their ways. Our brains kind of get set in their ways, and we have less ability for certain parts of our brain to take over. But I have a story today to tell you about how our brains can totally reshape themselves in the most amazing ways. So this is a story about a young lady named Jody and a pediatric neurosurgeon named Dr. Ben Carson, who many of you might have heard of. He actually ran for president. I'll put it this way. He is much more successful as a pediatric neurosurgeon than he ever was as a politician. Nothing against his political chops, but he is one heck of a neurosurgeon. This is how good he is. There's a young lady named Jody, about 24 years ago-ish. And she, 34 years ago. Sorry about that. 34 years ago. And she suffered from a disease, a disorder called Rasmussen syndrome. And in Rasmussen syndrome, what happens on one side of her brain, and it is with Rasmussen's, it's always on the right side of the brain. Our brains are divided into two hemispheres, a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. And the right hemisphere controls everything on the left side of the body. And the left hemisphere controls everything on the right side of the body. Her right hemisphere, Jody's right hemisphere, starting at the age of 3, started to have seizures every day. And she would have 2, 3, 4 seizures a day. Seizures are just a crazy, abnormal electrical circuits that are kind of bouncing out of control. And what that can do is that can lead to damage to your brain. And these seizures can travel, and they can go from one part of the brain and travel throughout their entire brain. And after a while, they hit a point that if that part of the brain seizes, you could die. So her seizures were so out of control. Honestly, many times people have seizures and they never have one again, or they have seizures and they are on anti-seizure medication the rest of their lives. But with Rasmussen syndrome and other diseases and disorders, seizure disorders, you may end up with nothing to stop it. So Dr. Carson said, there is a surgery that I can do. And it is called a hemispherectomy. And our brains are divided into 3 major sections. And the section he was going to take out was a section called the cerebral cortex, which doesn't have any of our like heartbeat, respiration, homeostatic systems. So that's, that's going to be, it might not be real good to remove, but it's not going to kill Jody. And he goes, if we do that, we stop the seizures. And the goal is to have Jody's other half of the brain take over. You see, when Jody had these seizures, she was already losing control of her left arm, her left leg, and other parts of her left side of her body. Because once again, the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. So Dr. Carson said, we really can't wait. If you want to do this, let's do this now. And they said, let's do it. So Jody and Dr. Carson were in surgery for over 20 hours. And Dr. Carson actually removed the right hemisphere of the cerebral cortex of Jody's brain. Now, Jody was only three and a half when she underwent this. So her brain had a tremendous amount of neuroplasticity, which Dr. Carson was hoping that her left hemisphere could take over all of the functions of her right hemisphere. This is how powerful neuroplasticity is. Within 10 days, Jody was walking out of the hospital. She had control of her left leg. Her left arm was still pretty weak as she was continuing to work on rehab. Her brain functioning was fine. Her feeling on the left side of her face was normal. Her mouth was normal. Everything was normal. The only thing that she had to deal with was some paralysis in her left arm, which she had been dealing with already, right? So this neuroplasticity changed this girl's brain in 10 days. 10 days. This story is incredible, but you know me. You know I want to connect it to what we can do as adults, as teenagers, as children, however old you are watching this podcast. Parents, I'm telling you this now. If you have the ways and the opportunities to teach your young children music and foreign language at a very young age, their brains are much more receptive, much more neuroplastic, and more capable of learning those skills at a young age than they are when they're much, much older. Okay. So me trying to learn the guitar now at my age would take me forever, and I would never be that good at it. My son, who's 7, is taking piano lessons right now, and it is amazing. He's an absolute sponge because his brain is so receptive to change, and it's so receptive to new information. It's also why we have him in a bilingual school right now, learning a second language, because the more you enhance those types of skills, the more your brain makes these neural connections that will benefit everything from problem solving and critical thinking skills to analytics, to language development, to musical talents, to appreciation of sounds, to comprehension in language. All of those things can benefit the more we're exposed to these things that can help to shape or reshape our brains. Our brains are an incredible, incredible organ. And it's always so interesting to me that we study the brain by using our brains. And it just adds to me the limitations that we really have to recognize how excellent this structure is and how amazing it is. But I just wanted to share with you just a few pieces of information about neuroplasticity. And I hope you gain some knowledge about this, and I hope it helps you help to reshape your brain and reshape the brains of your children and your children's children. I am Mr. E. This is MysterE's Mysteries. I want to thank you for watching us. Make sure you follow us on any place you can find a podcast. Check us out on any of our social medias, MysterE's Mysteries. And hey, please leave a comment. Give us a 5-star review. Hey, let us know if you have had ever any issues with seizure disorder or anything else where you've had any imaging, MRI scans, that sort of stuff done. Let us know some of your experiences with that. We'd love to hear about it. Big thank you to our producer and director, Bear Wade with Unify Agency. And as always, we thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.